Blue Antler is a liminal place. A place where knowledge lies in sun-filled meadows, and wisdom slumbers in the deepest shadows of the forest. Profound inner knowing comes when we touch the unknown. Our unions with the mysteries drive us onward. Our liminal conversations explore the lives of those who have touched the unknown. What was it like to experience the mysteries? How did they discover their path? Join my search for whispered secrets and hidden wisdom. Who knows? It may help you discover your path. Welcome back to Blue Antler, Whispered Secrets and Hidden Wisdom, a Discover Your Path podcast. I'm Ken, and today we will be talking to my friend, Mariah Kindle. Mariah is a traveler, a seeker of knowledge, and someone who strives to find the deeper wisdoms from many paths and traditions. Mariah has curated a spiritual path that allows for deeper knowing and self-understanding, and believes in sharing that knowing with others. She and I have that in common. The crooked path she walks has a foundation in many traditions. Taking what she needs and leaving the rest has helped create a life filled with magic, compassion, open-mindedness, and wonder. Okay, let's jump right into the conversation I had with my friend, Mariah. What is the first memory you have of being in a truly liminal place?
You have to go right for the hard ones, huh?
I it's like, let's bring up all the childhood stuff, which is apparently what I'm doing with everyone lately.
So, yeah, we're not going to go down the childhood stuff road today. We'll be here for a long time. But
Oh.
I will say it is related because I was actually fairly young in this journey that I've been on, in this curating my path, right? I think I was probably 15 or 16. And in the process, I was one of those kids who was always like, but why? And I need to know more, and I need this to go deeper. And so I was always like really looking for something more. And so in the process of being a teenager in church, it was never quite deep enough for me. I was always asking for more. And so during a relatively tumultuous time with the family unit, I just decided to, take myself outside, lay underneath my favorite tree, which doesn't exist in that yard anymore. And I just laid on the ground. And I laid there and I kind of just let myself not think, because I'm also a thinker. And so what ended up happening in that moment was, I actually don't even know how long of a time that was, how long I was even laying there. But I felt like I was being drawn into the earth. And what was so interesting about that experience is how vividly I recall it, but also how comforting it was to not be, I was in the present moment, but I wasn't in the same timeline, I guess is the way we can put it. And also not being in a future moment, right? So I was kind of in this really nice, comforting, warm, dark environment that allowed me to, how do I say this? It just allowed me to kind of let go of everything else that was. And so I didn't have to be here nor there. I didn't have to be now or then. I was just in the moment of being drawn in
Mm.
to the earth, and I just vividly remember how comforting that was and how beautiful that moment was. And I remember not wanting to leave that place because of that level of comfort. And I just felt truly loved.
Mm.
And then, like, coming out of that place, like, just realizing I had to be present now and I have to start thinking about what I need to do next. Right. And that I just really feel like that's one of my first kind of experiences in a liminal space, but not being, mm, it's not the same experience as what other people might describe as being kind of out in out of body, kind of out of in the universe, right? I was really
Yeah.
being drawn into the earth. Um, I didn't know what it meant at the time.
Um, you, I didn't know what it meant at the time, but I fill in the blank.
I knew it was the place, it was the beginning of a path of discovery.
Yes.
I knew it was the place where deeper, meaningful experiences resided.
Hmm. Hmm. I, when you spoke about kind of not wanting to come out of that place,
Mm-hmm.
I I slightly, the visual I had was like being birthed. Like that was because it's like you come out and you're screaming and you're like, put me back in the warm, comforting place. Like, don't put me out there. And um uh, was it, let me ask this, like, that's, being birthed is traumatic. I'm pretty sure if we could all call it, we would, still be upset and everyone would be in therapy, which we should be anyway.
Right.
But not but and um what what was it like now to have been in that space, and then I'm going to just use the metaphor, I opened the door, walked out, and closed the door, and now you're outside of that space. What was that like? Was it more jarring? What was that like? And um how did you take it with you?
So how
Or
I
did you?
well, I think that's a yes and, right? Like,
Yeah, yes, yes.
um, for me, how I think of it actually is kind of my first death experience.
Oh, okay.
So if you think about, if you're relating that as a death experience, similar to what you would think of as the death card in tarot, or
Mm-hmm.
any one of the runes that symbolizes uh, a death and stillness and things like that. So how I think about that as the first death experience, and why I use that language is because it it was almost instantaneously coming back out of that experience. Yes, a little jarring because of course I wanted to like hang out in a place that was comfortable.
Of
Um,
course.
but also kind of really knowing coming out of that there were things that I could do now. There were things, and again, I didn't know at the time which direction this would take me, but I think honestly, a whole new world opened up that you I didn't have to be on the path of my parents, or I didn't have to be on the path of my friends. I didn't have to be on the path of, the youth pastor at the time, who I actually really, really liked. But it was just kind of it was the door opening. Like there was one, this is exceedingly cliche, but like, I'm going to say it anyway.
There's a reason they are cliche, because
Right, excuse
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Where it was definitely a realization that door is closing. I've just opened a new one, and I get to decide which door is it that I get to open, or how many doors do I get to open to get to a place where I want to be, to get to be the person that I want to be.
So, was that your first initiatory experience?
It was, actually.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay, forgive me, because this can be a weird subject. We experience certain things, like, when a young person who identifies as female and who has those the parts that we associate with that, when they first start menstruating, that we see that as an initiation.
Mm-hmm.
That is very often not spoken about, and you just get tampons thrown at you. That's what I'm picturing. Except for like in 5th grade when we had the whole like body, know your body, right? Like know your body video that my dad left in, and I was left to sit there. So we are talking about childhood. Okay. So how, because the experience you're talking about was you were about 15 or 16.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you didn't, do you not see when you first started your menstruation cycle as part of an initiation, or do you like, how does that fit into, like, now that we're talking about initiatory rites, was that something big for you?
No. Plainly. It was very similar to what you're talking about. We sat through that class in 5th grade, and nobody understood what the hell was going on. The boys got
No.
separated into one room, the girls were separated into another. And, in 5th grade, you're like, that's not going to happen to me.
Yep.
And it was actually several years following that before I had my first menstrual cycle. And what was torture for me about that is I was riding my bike. So,
Oh no.
so that was a thing. Luckily, I was just with my sister, so it wasn't like, with a group of friends. That would have been devastating.
Right. Right.
In modern society, these are things we don't talk about, particularly when we're connected to a Christian faith or a Abrahamic faith. These are just things that I'll say specifically Christianity, because it's not something that is discussed. You don't talk about sex. You don't talk about menstruation. You don't talk about all the things we should probably be talking about. And so for me,
What?
Yeah, no,
No.
that's a thing. For real.
Yeah.
I think they do a much better
God.
job in other Abrahamic faiths about preparing young women, particularly in Judaism. I think they do a much better job.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, it was like, well, I guess that's a thing that happens. And so I don't have what other people describe as the woman's wound or the mother's wound. I don't see those parts of my life as something that was traumatic or something that was revolutionary. It was just a stage that I needed to move through to get to another stage. Am I making any sense whatsoever?
No, absolutely. What I was just noticing, and maybe I think I don't know if you may not have any words to speak about this, but I love that you, for whatever reason, we said it wasn't revolutionary or traumatic.
Mhm.
Um, and I just that there's an interesting, like, why did you pick those words? I guess is what I'm asking. Why did you pick those words?
Well, I feel like revolutionary in my mind means that there is something that was a huge and impactful change, right? This is like
Yeah.
all of a sudden everything's different. Well, the fact is, it was, the only thing that was different is that I had to spend money on feminine hygiene products. Why did they call them feminine hygiene products, by the way? Um, and
Like it's dirty.
right,
Like it's dirty.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
It's not dirty.
it wasn't anything that dramatically changed anything about me. Um,
Yeah.
Momhood, on the other hand, actually was a fairly, revolutionary because it changed everything about who I was. But it
Mm.
it also
Mhm.
wasn't traumatic. I mean, besides being on my bike and hanging out with my sister and having to get several miles back to my house, um,
Yeah.
it wasn't traumatic either. It wasn't something that was.
Mm.
It was just normal, natural,
Yeah.
something like almost instinctually I knew was normal and natural.
Um, Thank you for saying that. I love that you described it as you just knew. Um, I In a recent interview, uh, my friend Kate and I, we talked about. She said the same thing about giving birth. She said, "I can give birth every day of the year. I don't want to ever be pregnant again.
Hmm.
It's not fun for me." But there was something so natural about, like, I didn't take Lamaze class. Yeah, I had an epidural, but it really kind of wore off, and then I felt everything. But she said it was just
Hmm.
natural, and I just knew what to do, and they helped coach me through it, and so it was less. She said for her it was less traumatic to be being coached through what was happening versus spending 9 months reading What to Expect When You're
Hmm.
Expecting and going to Lamaze class, which was not great for her. What was giving birth like for you?
Actually, very much the same. I was very young. Um, I was 18 when my son was born and 21 when my daughter was born. So I had two kids
Wow.
under 3 by the time I was 21 years old. But
Are you Mormon?
I am
Just
not.
kidding. We're
I was just,
Woo, that's Mormon.
yes. However, I was unmarried, and that was the thing.
Oh,
Um,
mm-hmm.
but
Yep.
so I didn't necessarily have the opportunity to do Lamaze classes. I didn't really know to even look for books about, what to expect when you were expecting. Um,
Yeah.
and I had large children. They were big, but it was very, very natural to me. My daughter actually, she's the second. She was smaller than my son when he was born, and that went start to finish with no epidural, no medications, nothing. And I do not, and I cannot recall. I can't recall pain. So my memory of
Mm.
those times in my life, it was not painful. It was not scary. I mean, at the time, I'm sure it was painful, but I just don't recall it. It wasn't scary for me.
Yeah.
It was very natural. I was very young, maybe just real stupid about this, but it was, there were kids at the end of this process, and
Yeah.
the reality is, for me, being 18 years old and having a tiny person in my arms. And I look at this child and was completely, fully, deeply, madly in love with this kid
Yeah.
instantly. And he changed the entire trajectory of my life. So one of the things I talk about actually a lot about regret. Um,
Mm.
and what I, and by that I mean, I don't have regrets.
Hmm.
I would not change a single thing in my life. It's a waste of my time to be thinking about regret, because if I express regret about getting pregnant at 17, getting married and having a baby at 18, having a second child at 21, if I expressed regret about that, that in my mind is regretting my own children and regretting those experiences. And I don't.
Yep. No.
I don't regret
Yeah.
divorcing their dad. I don't regret, you know,
I think you're right. It's a waste of
yeah,
time.
completely.
It's a waste of time, and it also is, um, well, uh, when I talk about Angerboda, especially when we talk about the rune Ak, every um, every mark on her staff that tells Angerboda is a giantess in the northern traditions. For those of you who are listening who don't know, um, she's the head of like 13 tribes of people, and every marking on her staff is what got her there. It represents a battle or whatever, and it's not just the wins. It's the things that maybe didn't turn out like they were supposed to. So wishing we had done, having regret, to me, is actually, it actually impedes us accepting and stepping into our own sovereignty, and our own power, maybe. Um,
For your listeners,
yeah.
if you could see me, I am nodding my head violently in agreement. Um, in that,
I was going to ask if you were having a
no,
seizure,
I am not. I'm
but luckily you're not.
legitimately agreeing very, very, very enthusiastically, because I think all of the things, the wins, yes, but the things that we would consider losses, or the things that we would consider failure, everything within the failure is something you can learn to move forward in your life with. Like,
Yeah.
you take what you need from that and you leave the rest. Like, some of the things,
Yeah.
some of the lessons I've gotten in life were specifically in times of bad. And you
Mm.
realize what you're not willing to put up with, um, in a
Mm-hmm.
faith-based system, or in a relationship, or in a friendship, or in a job. Um, all the things, I
Family.
mean, these are beautiful things. When I think back to coming out to my parents as a lesbian, oh my God, I was an adult, formally married with 2 young children. And of course, I'd been interested in girls my entire life, but that's
Yeah.
neither here nor there. Um, so, being in my mid 20s and coming out to my parents, and I'm thinking, this is terrifying, A. And instead of actually, this is a hilarious story. What I did was write them a letter about what I appreciated about them, and how the lessons that they taught me were why I was strong enough in this place to be single, lesbian, parents of 2 children, right? And what I was referring to was the lessons of how not to be, right?
I'm sorry. I had to mute myself and laugh because I, all I could think about was my mom. Uh, she never did this, but and I think I would, if I were a parent, I would do it just to be funny. But so wait, you're blaming this on me, because it's not even about like, look, you made me strong enough to do this. It's like you're blaming this on me, and I'm like, well, you did smoke throughout your whole pregnancy and right up to the time you like pushed me out. Yeah. So sorry, I just had to laugh because I just watched that play in my head. What what did that? Sorry. So how did that go down?
So,
I'm sorry. I know you were in the middle of telling
oh,
us
no, no,
that.
no. So it's actually, so that's funny. What I did was, instead of saying things like, you basically suck, to, you taught me how to be strong. You taught me how to be independent. You taught me, I could have said, you taught me how to take a punch, or you taught me how to like be unfeeling. But instead, I turned that around and basically, because it wasn't about them, it was about me, right? Like, I
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
lessons that I have taken from you are what I'm not willing to put up with in a relationship, but in the words that I used were, I now know what I need in a relationship for a fulfilling life, right? So
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
I used, I'm a little bit of a trickster in regard to language.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I can tell you to fuck off in fancy words and you don't realize I've just told you to fuck off until you go
Yeah.
back and think about it.
Yeah.
Sorry, you could bleep that part out if you want.
Oh God, no. Fuck no. No, no, no. No, no, no. We don't.
No bleeping.
People ask me that all the time. They're like, "Are you going to edit this?" I'm like, No, I'll listen back to it, but I will probably not edit anything out unless it's me like blathering on about something that doesn't even apply. So no. Um, Can I ask you this about
Uh-huh.
that? So we're basically what I'm getting. This is what I'm hearing you say. Uh, you used whatever Grammarly was at that point, which is your brain, to wordsmith it so that it was about it stayed focused on you, but also involved them, but not in a blaming way. Um, what uh, what was the motivation for that?
For me, I think it was freedom. I got to make a decision. I got to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
born out of compassion.
Mm.
So during,
Oh, you're
well,
nice.
during this time, so maybe back on track here. During this time, I was also studying Buddhism, and a big part of the lessons I have taken out of Buddhism are about compassion and right mindfulness and ways to pull that compassion forward in a conversation. And so while I was freeing myself from the relationship that had been with them, I wanted to come to this from a place of compassion so that if they chose, we can continue to grow in a relationship as adults, right? Rather than them viewing me as a child and me viewing them as parents, we can grow. Well, I mean, they're still my parents, but we can grow through compassion. I
Yeah.
continued on that study and on that path initially, and choose daily as much as I can to live from a place of compassion. They did not choose that. And I acknowledge that and let them
Yeah.
live in that space while I live from a place of compassion.
Do you think they actually had the ability to make a choice in that? Do you like? Do you think did they have the ability to see it differently than the way they actually reacted?
Do they have the ability? I think the ability is a choice.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I
Yeah.
think if they,
Hmm.
generationally, I'll put it this way, generationally, um, their lives were very different than mine, right? Their
Yes.
choices were based on what was provided to them by a different set of rules, a different set of parents, a different set of faith-based systems. And so I think that that world for them was smaller. And so their choices were limited. However, they raised me, so I don't know how I figured out that there was a choice, but eventually I did figure out.
You got taken into Mother Earth under a
I
tree
did.
for who knows how long, and then you were spit back out and initiated into a different
Yeah.
place.
And there were
That's
different
how.
lessons, different choices that were made.
Hmm.
And I think maybe that just that setting on that path, right? Figuring out that
Yeah.
deeper wisdoms is what allowed me to make different
Yeah.
choices, and not living in this box that was created
Yeah.
for me.
Which never fit to begin with. So, and I do. Thank you for answering that. Because it's something that topic is something I've been thinking about. Um, I feel like I want to jump track a little bit. So, how did you handle your daughter's first menstruation? Because you went through it there and it wasn't that big of a deal, and you went through the fifth grade thing. How did all of your experiences now living outside of the box influence your encountering her initiatory rite at that point?
So I did a lot of things very differently from in raising kids, and so in our world, so for a very long time it was just my son, my daughter, myself. So I started talking to them about how their bodies grow and change using age appropriate language in as much as I understood it at the time, using age appropriate language to explain things that if we would have loved to have known when we were 5 or 10 or 15, right?
Yeah.
So for my daughter, I I hope for her that it was a different experience than what I had, because she had always grown up understanding more about her body and how things were going to change when she had her first menstrual cycle, and when she needed tampons, and so she understood more about that. By the time she I don't know how physically present I was by the time she was in her early teenagehood. So she, like me, she was a late bloomer, as we would call it. So she was 12 or 13, and
Mhm.
so she was a full-time school person. I was a full-time, work employee somewhere. So I wasn't physically present, but we definitely had conversations
Yeah.
um, ongoing from the time she was little. This poor girl, she has had, she has an interesting anatomy without going into any detail, which has
She appreciates this, by
unfortunately,
the way. Thank you.
yes,
She's like,
yes,
thank you for not going into detail. Thank you.
yeah. But it is horrible for me to actually see this, but her anatomy is so interesting that it causes her a great deal of pain, and it
Mm.
always has. And so she, unfortunately, if she were to do some work around the woman's wound, I think she would have a lot of work to do, because she has had, it's
Wow.
been so bad for her. And there's not, as a mom person, all you want to do is make sure that she's not in pain and make sure that she isn't wounded or hurting. And so,
Yeah.
but again, we still have the ability to have those open and honest conversations. And although I don't know what she's going through necessarily, I can 100% be there for her.
Yeah. Wow.
So
I
she's,
appre I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, to put this in context a little bit, she's now 31. So
So it's not like, yeah.
it wasn't
Um,
like 2 years ago when this
yeah.
happened.
Uh, um, I will say I appreciate your sensitivity around that because oh my God, I'm going through a whole bunch of apparently childhood memories. Because I remember being at the bowling alley and hearing my mom behind me talking to my aunt about my undescended testicle and how we were going to have to fix that. And I turned around and stared at her, and she looked at me, and I'm like, God, why are you talking about that in public? You know, like I was mortified. And so I was like, so I can, from a child's perspective, thank you for not doing that to your daughter.
And you telling me that story, what made me go, why would you talk about that in public?
Yeah, right, right. That's
Oh my
exactly right.
gosh.
Yeah. And I love my mom.
Yeah.
God rest her soul, or rest in peace, or wherever she is. Um, probably shaking her head. Uh, it's interesting. Um, Initiatory rites have been a quite a large thread that I've been playing with, or looking into. And so I appreciate you sharing with me those experiences of yours. Now, you and I met. Did we decide it was 2019, 18, 19?
I
We've
think
actually never met in person.
right.
Yeah.
It might have been 17, 18.
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think so. So that long ago, um, pre-COVID, oh my God, do you think COVID's actually going to be as big as like Jesus Christ? You know how they used to say like BC and like whatever, but we're like, oh my God, COVID's so big now. We're like BC, but it's like before COVID.
Yeah, right.
And I know, I don't even know. I think that was my very rudimentary upbringing that taught me that. Anyway, uh, oh, what is wrong with me?
Where are you going?
Yeah, where am I going with this? This is where I'm going. I met you, and then right before March of 2020, we were supposed to do a conference, which is
Mhm.
education conference, and your company is called Liminal Magic. What
Liminal
do you?
magic. Yeah.
Okay, so now this is where I'm going with this. At what point in your life did you then become consciously participating and aware enough that you began to form language around the thing that happened at the base of the tree? Those type of experiences that you had in life. At what point, where were you at? What happened to kind of maybe flip the switch to where it actually became more of a conscious partnership instead of these events happening throughout your life that
Mm.
you didn't maybe have context or meaning for, but now we are putting words into that?
How much time do we have?
Huh, yeah, we got time. We got time. We
Excellent.
got time.
So one of the very first things I did, so now again, this is years later after that, experience under the tree. Young mom, newly married, lots of time, stay-at-home mom. By the way, I was a terrible stay-at-home mom. Terrible. I had to be doing something. So we were always out of the house, me and the kids. Anyway, side note, I actually started studying. And so the very first thing that I started studying was the Bible. Not just, when I say studying, I mean like this is deep dive, line by line studying, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So I started with that because that was the place that I knew, right? The place that I understood. And then I was still unanswered questions. So I started exploring the idea of getting a degree in comparative religion. And,
Wow.
again, at that point, there was no access to education for me. It was the early, oh my God, it was the late 80s, early 90s. And so
Yeah.
online education didn't truly exist.
No.
So going back to school was not really an option for me. And so local library, I started checking out books from as many possible Abrahamic faiths that I could think of. Um, started going outside of, so I started studying Judaism, which is kind of based a little bit on family lore. Like, okay, so part of my family is Jewish. Let me study more about that. Actually, really enjoyed that study. It was much deeper than what we know currently as the Christian Bible or the New Testament. And
Yeah.
then another part of family lore says that we have some percentage of Ojibwe in our history, so a Native American ancestry. And so I was like, okay, that feels like it could be closer to home. So I started studying that tradition. The more I started studying that tradition, um, the less at home it felt.
Mm.
It's beautiful, and it's so deep and so rich, and there is a lot of in at least the Ojibwe tradition. There's a lot of connection to the land and to the animals and to everything, molecules of air, drops of water. It was so rich and detailed and beautiful, and that's where I started to develop some of that language. Some of the language, the important ancestors. Had I thought about
Mhm.
ancestors before that time? No. Like, I had no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
And then at some point, as I started to research this family lore a little bit, I realized that I was going a little bit, moving a little bit closer to appropriation rather than appreciations of uh,
Okay.
of the tradition. And while still I really enjoy the study of that, I'm very mindful about how or if some of that is incorporated into how I practice today. And then from there, I went into Buddhism, like I mentioned before. And I didn't I didn't tiptoe into Buddhism. I went head first. Like it was like I read one book and I was like, this feels like home, right? This feels beautiful and brilliant and a lot of really rich history, old tradition.
Yeah.
These traditions are old. And then something about I started working in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion before it was in vogue, I suppose, is the best way to put that. And the
Yeah.
more I started studying Buddhism, particularly American Buddhism, uh, the more I realized how whitewashed it was. And so I stepped around what American Buddhism looks like at that time and then looks like today and started diving much deeper. And I got to a specific book. One of the very first lines in the book had me stop completely. I haven't even finished that book to this day. Um,
Wow. What was the line? Do you I know, sorry, what a dick move, huh?
yeah, the book is still sitting on my shelf. Still sitting. I can see it right now. It was something about, it was a line about forgiving yourself. I was
Mm.
like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to do that yet. Anyway, side note,
That's a whole other podcast.
yeah, 100%. It's probably in a
Jeez.
different genre, right? Um,
I'm sure
so
Brene Brown has a book about it.
probably. I actually looked at that
Sorry, I
book
just
you
bought
were.
the book I bought today. I know, like sorry, I have really refrained from buying Brene Brown books because I have a little bit of an aversion to all of the every single damn uh reel or video on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok now is, okay, let me tell you how to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, God, please don't. But I actually find her extremely good at storytelling. And I love her TED Talks because when I'm watching her, I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. Great. Yes, great point. Love it. Yeah, so I appreciate her ability to storytell. So I'm not just talking shit. I actually do really love her and appreciate her. And I did buy a fucking book.
And what I
For
find
all of my listeners who love Brene.
what I find fascinating about her is that she is incredibly smart and she is very, very grounded. So
Yeah, she
her
is.
wisdom comes from a place of knowing and from a really grounded place. It's not up there in the clouds that feels unattainable to the rest of the
Mhm.
normies out here who just need a little bit of
Yep,
help. It's just very attainable the way that she presents her information. So shout out to Brene Brown.
it is. I know. And it doesn't hurt that she has that nice Southern Texan accent. That's
Oh, the
very grounding
drawl.
as well, I feel,
Yeah,
as well.
I love the Southern drawl. I'm
Yep,
just not gonna lie.
yep, absolutely.
um,
I'm a sucker for an accent.
same, big same. um, so I think that I started going into a different and interesting places that were not commonly associated with the Buddhism that we know in
Mm,
the West. I started going
yeah,
really deep into Tibetan Buddhism and really kind of digging into a lot of that. And I still actually, a lot of that still lives with me. It's a lot of the place that I come from. But I like the mindfulness aspect. That is not, for me, is not buzzwordy. It's something that I have brought forward from those teachings. I use it in business meetings. I use the word mindfulness. I use, some of the Eightfold Path and the principles behind that and underneath that drive that. I use a lot of that language now. Um,
yeah.
it didn't really hit me until one day somebody commented on the fact that I used the word mindful a lot, and I really mean it when we need, we need to be mindful in our everyday life.
Yeah.
And then you probably know this too. I kind of fell into Wicca for about a minute and a half. And again, I'm not going to criticize what is currently known as Wiccan tradition. Um,
No.
I think it's very appropriate for a lot of people. There were some fun and interesting things I learned from Wicca.
Yeah.
Um, but it went back up for me to a very surface level knowing. For me personally, there wasn't it mimicked a lot of what was familiar for me in a Christian tradition. There was a lot of ritual that looked very similar, and so it bubbled back up to a surface level place. And so I
Yeah.
decided at some point to do a year and a day training around a specific goddess who was Greek. And I've never really meshed with the Greeks. I've never
Hmm.
really felt drawn to the Greek tradition. And so it was surprising to me that that's the decision I made. But this goddess felt deeper, darker, richer, more complex. Um, and so in doing this, okay, so I will tell you that I paid for and began the year in the day training. And as soon as they said to me, you have to use the tarot in this training, I was like, and we're done. Again, not going to disparage anybody who uses tarot. It's just not something that I connected with. But
Yeah.
part of that exploration with that goddess actually led me to a lot of the language that I do use now, particularly when we talk about the liminal space. Um, I've experienced a lot of I've had a number of death experiences. I have been in the liminal space. I have been able to learn how to travel in that liminal space.
Yeah.
And it really is kind of a combination of all of that experience. Right. And then
Yeah.
to wrap this up, when you and I finally met, it was kind of my, I need more. I'm always going to be that kid.
Yeah.
I'm always going to be that kid that needs to know more. And so I think where we found each other was in some group. What was the name of it?
I can't remember yesterday,
Oh,
so I'm going to be completely shit at trying to remember that.
I think it was Practitioners of the Old Ways.
Oh, yes, it was.
And
Yeah. Thank God you have a memory.
sort of. And
I don't.
it was really like, it was that combination of words that was comfortable. And I actually still use that phrase, even though the group was weird and now defunct.
Yeah.
But it brought us together. So
So it did its purpose. Like we're the only ones that it was existed for.
Right.
Like listen to me in my very white male hierarchical Christian mindset. Yeah, it all happened for me. What bullshit, huh? Well, God. Okay, there was something I wanted to read to you because I felt like it was you I don't do cards, but I was drawn to the wild unknown archetypes. But it's the card is called the Mystic, the Seeker, and the Dreamer. I'm going to find it. One moment. Where is that one line? Now I'm trying to do it and it's not going to work.
well, I can kind of clarify. Oh, go ahead.
The true mystic plays a critical role in society, remaining fearlessly dedicated to the path of transformation in order to save the earth from darkness. Which I love. They are patient and prudent change makers, seeking growth above all else. Unanswerable questions are the mystic's lifeblood. The mystic revels in mystery, in the great riddle of life, dancing with the forces of light and dark upon its wings. And that's exactly what I feel like you kind of pulled out in what you said about there's a passion for knowing more. And I feel like I just wanted to share that with you because I felt whoever wrote that, Kim Kranz, thank you, Kim Kranz, or whoever edited it or ghost wrote it, maybe, I don't know, whoever it was, but I appreciate them because when I pulled that card the other day, it just was like, oh yeah, like it kind of put a name to why I feel like I'm constantly moving and asking and all that. So I appreciate that in you as well.
Thank you. That was actually quite lovely. And I suppose should clarify the tarot and my relationship with the tarot, or lack thereof. In that I also use oracle cards. I appreciate the flexibility in oracle cards. I do appreciate the need for a tool to tap into a connection, maybe a deep connection for you as an individual, or a deep connection when you're reading for somebody else. I appreciate the tool.
Sure.
But I think I'm trying to be really mindful about what I say. I think that for too many, they're over reliant on the tool and not truly stepping into those liminal spaces.
Yeah.
to get what they need or what their client needs or whoever they're reading for. The tool is not the thing that gets you to the information you need. The tool is a tool.
Correct. I really did not connect with tarot. I love the imagery of tarot, which is why I have tarot
Mm-hmm.
decks. And they're nice and still sitting, and they're dusty on the shelf. But I feel like even talking about the runes, like people, they want to know how to read them. They want to know how to do a reading, and I'm like, oh my god, the, they're beings, and when they get together, depending on how drunk they are, or how stoned, or how hungry, or how horny, it's all going to be a different mishmash of what comes out. Like, you have to be able to step into the stream, and yes, they help kind of narrow down the message, but there's much more to it than that. So I agree with you
Well, I think that's
wholeheartedly.
what I actually like about the runes too. So the first tarot deck I had is called a pip deck, where it doesn't have the same
Mm,
imagery that you would see in a standard kind of artistic deck. It's more like what regular playing cards might look like. And so
yeah,
that interestingly enough, I was able to connect with the cards without imagery because it was just a
yeah,
depiction of like 5 swords, right? And
right.
so for the runes for me too is a very much, yes, just a tool, but also there is a deeper connection because there's nothing that sits on top of them that describes how you are supposed to read them.
Right. I have I have a
Mm-hmm.
question for you. And it's one that I keep it keeps popping up, and then I forget about it, and then it pops up again and I forget about it. But it's popped up again. And you and I, we talk twice or more a month via Zoom. So I see your beautiful curly hair. I Because we can see each other during the interview, I've noticed how much your hands are in your hair, and you're like fluffing it almost. It's beautiful curly hair, and it's I want to know why. If there is a reason, there doesn't have to be a reason. I just know that I feel like hair can be, has the potential to be energetic antenna, or it's like if I'm when I rub my hands or my fingers together during a psychic reading, working through the threads or touching things. So I've never thought about that with you, because you always, like, you've in the past had
Mm-hmm.
short hair, and we've talked about your hair, and now tonight for some reason it's like this, like I feel like this, like, storm of, like, you're unleashing, and you're it's almost like you're this is my interpretation of how I'm seeing it energetically, um like letting loose all the tendrils of curls, and letting them play. Like, it's not letting your hair down, it's letting your hair out. And that's what I'm saying. But do you have an experience with that part of you as expressing?
So that's, my gosh. So my hair has always been a fairly significant part of my identity.
Mm-hmm.
Not fairly significant, a really, really significant part of my identity. Wearing it short for so long, and I'm like 30 years wearing my hair short, like not much longer than yours. Um, literally.
Yes.
Um, and that provided me with a confidence personally, wearing my hair so short, being so ahead of the short haircut, uh, what is it called?
Yeah.
Trend.
Trend.
So much. I had always worn my hair short, for personal reasons, and it allows me to be. The short hair allowed me to be. What's the word I'm looking for? I wore it short. I wore it spiky. I was very confident when my hair was short. It was surprising, shocking. I loved being shocking. I kind of still
Yeah.
like being shocking, but so interestingly enough, I think shortly after you and I first met was when I had decided to grow my hair out. And largely
Hmm.
because there are, in a number of traditions, there is a direct link to the length of your hair and how much you are connected energetically. And
Hmm.
I understood that at the time, kind of when I made the decision. Lots of stuff in my life was changing anyway, so why not do something with my hair? Um,
Yeah.
and so I do feel like I need to keep this hair. I need to see what what is this? How am I going to? Can this help me connect deeper? That was a very long-winded answer,
Hmm.
but I will tell you too that uh, I recently had thought I need to be that shocking, spiky person again. I need this personal confidence back. And I seriously
Yeah.
considered cutting my hair off recently.
Hmm.
And then it's really funny. My sister said we were out together and I didn't put anything in my hair. It was just curly and out of control. And she's like, "You're rocking some serious earth goddess energy." And I'm like, "All right, sold it. Not cutting my hair off."
Done.
Thanks,
Thank
sister.
you. I love it. I I will, yeah, I'll tell you a story um when we're done. But and band but
Yes,
I don't know.
and yes,
Um
and
yeah, yes, and I got called a yes man in corporate America. So I at first I thought that was good, and then someone explained to me that it's not. So now I have an aversion to yes. um yeah, I don't know. I'm so traumatized. Um I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to be flippant, but I'm just been realizing a lot like where some of my shit is coming from. So, um, self-discovery, folks.
isn't it
Check the book
cool that we
out.
get to wake up every day and find something new about ourselves that we
Yeah.
can either embrace or let go of?
Yes. Yes. I love it. Um, Speaking of, what advice would you, if you were standing on the stage at Harvard's commencement, or at, I don't know, Picayune State Community College, it doesn't matter. What would you like? You could speak on anything. What is your advice? Like, what is your advice? And not only to, college age folks, but like, what is your advice? What would you tell people? Like, what's your motto, mantra?
So
I know
I
you have to pick
know. What
one.
the heck?
I
Actually,
know. Dick move.
whatever.
You can only say one thing. What would it be? You're like, that's not me. Don't put me in a box.
Right. The one thing that I've actually said on stage to a group of students or potential students is, and still is, figure out your personal mission. Write it down. live that mission to the best of your ability and understand that that mission is going to change as you grow and change. So at 18, your mission is very different than what it is at 30. And it's very different again at 50. And maybe, it doesn't even have to be decades long, but start from the foundation of a personal mission. What do you value right now that can lay the foundation for that personal mission so that you can go forward and fail successfully to be able to grow the life that you want to have?
That was a great conversation. I probably say that about every one of them, but I do feel that way. I think we went down some roads that neither of us really expected, which is kind of what I like about hosting my own show. So, for those of you who might be interested in working with Mariah, as well as working in higher education, she is the Executive Witch and Chief Creative Officer of Liminal Magic Consulting, a small business that helps pagan-owned businesses grow and thrive. She combines practical business solutions and a lot of her psychic insights to focus attention on your needs and the needs of the business. So if you find yourself in that wheelhouse, needing someone with that expertise, please reach out to Mariah. Our conversation today was fun and deep and light and shallow and funny and all those fun things. So I hope you enjoyed it today, and I hope that you got something out of it to help you discover your path. So thank you for listening to Blue Antler, Whispered Secrets and Hidden Wisdom, a Discover Your Path podcast.